Scott Morrison, good to see you.
G'day, Paul. Welcome to the show.
Well, how could you give this up at any time?
Now you know what I was missing.
Yeah, correct. What's it been like reconnecting with not just this, but the pre-Prime Minister self?
To be honest, obviously disappointed about the election result, and I know many of your viewers were too, but being able to reconnect with my community, my family, with friends and our life down here in the Shire has been a real joy.
How long does it take to decompress from the pressure of an election campaign, but also the pressure of running the country, that literally Saturday night it's all on your shoulders, Sunday morning you don't have to take the calls? How long does it take to get back to sort of normal?
Well, I don't think we're still there. I think that's a process which goes on. Some never adjust, but I think it's important to. And I think if you've got a life centred in things that are not just about politics, then that I think really helps you. And I like to think of Jenny and I a lot like that. It's an important part of our life. It's been an important part of what we've had the privilege to do, and we're very grateful for that. But our life is much more than that. But yes, immediately there is a weight that is lifted, one that you've been privileged to carry. I think the thing I notice most is that the pace of your day, which was non-stop before, that isn't there, and you sort of get quite accustomed to moving at that pace, and you sort of wake up each day ready to do a million things, and after a while you sort of go, well, that's not quite so bad. Not doing all of those things all the time. But equally, I mean, things like people talk about the position and curability and all the rest of it. That was nice, but it was never about that for us, and those are things I don't miss at all. Why would you? And it's nice to be back in a sort of a routine suburban life, which we love.
It's interesting when you look at how former Prime Ministers start this next phase of their life, and some seem to adjust better than others, but also you can tell the difference. For some, there's a sense that the Prime Ministership was their job versus something that happened to them. How do you view the Prime Ministership?
Well, with gratitude. That's my honest response. And you have a choice in politics. You can get all bitter and about what didn't happen and what should have happened and what someone said to you and said about you, and frankly they're still saying it. You can allow that to define yourself as a person and your political experience, or you can just be thankful. And so I want to thank your viewers, Paul, because they've been so supportive of me, particularly most recently. And I just want them to know, yeah, I'm fine, and I'm philosophical about political life. If you want fair, don't go into politics. Don't expect it to be. It's not going to be, and that's not what it's about. It's an opportunity to serve. You take it as it comes.
It felt, though, that part of the election contest has gone beyond the election. Part of the focus, part of the let's go ScoMo still exists, talking about the specific, former High Court judge looking into the multiple ministries things. John Howard told me on the show that it was about squeezing the lemon when they were talking about endless inquiries and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's about accountability or something else?
I'm certainly not going to get bitter about it. I think many people can see through these things. I've said what I've had to say about the issue, particularly about the ministries. Look, it was an incredibly tumultuous time. I mean, the very thing that triggered this discussion, that book that Simon Benson and Jeff Chambers have written, it's a good account of just the pace and the demands that were placed upon all of those. Not just myself, there were others in positions of authority at a state level and local government level. And everyone did, I think, the best they could possibly do in good faith. That's certainly how I approach it. So I'm proud of what we achieved over that period of time. We made thousands and thousands of decisions. And, I'm sure, as is the nature of politics, people will pore over this one and that one. But, at the end of the day, as I've moved around the world, as I did as Prime Minister and have since, people look at Australia and go, how'd you do that? So if people want to argue the toss about some things some years later outside the context of what was occurring, fine, that's our democratic process. The people who choose to pursue that, that's their call. We'll work with that, but I'm proud of what we achieved and what we're able to do for so many thousands and indeed millions of Australians when they needed us.
But about the multiple ministries thing, Now, I spoke to a bunch of people who didn't vote for you, and they got a few questions for you.
Yeah.
You gave a press conference, multiple statements, but of course, somebody else always wants to have the final word. They say, why didn't you say sorry? Why didn't you say sorry loud enough? Why didn't you give a pint of your blood? Are there times when things would have been better if you just said sorry louder and faster?
Well, I've made my statements. I've explained the situation, and I don't expect everybody to agree with me, or if anyone to agree with me. I've given my explanation. It was an extraordinary period of time, as I've said, and at all times I was trying to do what was best for the country, and there was just so much happening. There was just one thing after the other, and you just made thousands of decisions, and it's not like you sat around and, gesticulated over them all endlessly. You just didn't have that luxury. And so, undoubtedly, the people look back from the safety of the shore as to what was happening in the tempest at the time and make their judgments. That's okay. There was a text message I sent to Kieran, and Kieran accepts that was just a private message. And it wasn't saying, when I say I'm not involved in the day-to-day politics, and I know some of your viewers would have been upset about seeing that. I think it was misunderstood. I wasn't saying I'm into looking after my local community and doing that job every day. What I'm not into is in getting engaged in the to and fro of the political circus, of this and that, and argue this and that, and responding to this criticism from someone having a sledge at you and this, or buying into this, or look. I'm part of a team under Peter's leadership and the shadow ministry that's there and the other members, and I want them, to really find their feet and for them to find, their great talent expressed. When I look back over particularly the last 3 years, could I have been more engaged in the political fight over that time? They certainly were. That's politics. I'm not having a crack at them. Governing should come first over politics. And if I've paid a political price for that, well, fair enough. I get that.
What's it like to be the person trying to herd cats known as National Cabinet?
Well, National Cabinet has their knockers, and I'd say 90% of them are watching this program right now.
Correct.
And I get that. But, I think Australia had a lesson in federation over the course of the pandemic. Many people thought I had powers that I did not have, ironically, given the events of recent times. And the powers that I did have and used, they were apparently not happy that I used them. But we had a lecture really in that our federation puts enormous powers in the states. Now, there was no ability to direct them and do this. So what did I have to do? Well, I had to get them all in a room, and you had to try and play the percentages of getting as many decisions as consistently made by as many of them as possible, as often as possible. And by and large, we did that. And while it was criticised, it's now been continued and only met just last week.
Yeah.
So as a mechanism, it's probably the worst one you can have, except for everything else that you could do. Now, I know that people were really frustrated about the powers and the decisions that premiers took. And they've got to be accountable for those, like I had to be accountable for the decisions that I was responsible for. But as a Prime Minister, it is the job to herd cats. And they're cats. I can't turn them into sheep or lions or whatever you want to turn them into. They are what they are, and they have the powers that they have. And you couldn't do fantasy football here. You had to deal with the reality of the powers they had, the challenge that we were dealing with, and how best to do that. And could you do that 5 minutes ago?
Haters can interpret this conversation however they wish. Yeah. The mere fact we're here will be enough to annoy them. But about your predecessor, the media seems to be a lot more excited about the start of his prime ministership than, say, the start of yours or even Tony Abbott's. Or Malcolm
you mean
Turnbull's.
My successor?
Yes, your successor, my apologies.
Yeah.
I was trying to come up with a clever question. The media seems a little more into the ideas of things like job summits, and despite the fact that we had to do something about cost of living urgently before the election, nothing can happen for 3 months after. Are you sitting there every night at 6 o'clock blowing up because it feels unfair, or...?
No, I'm not.
You're done?
No, I'm not blowing up at the television because, the country, we had an election, the government changed hands, it's now their go. They made a whole bunch of commitments about what they were going to do, so get on and do it, and let's see how you go. And for the sake of the country, I hope you do well. And I said that on election night, and I meant it. And I remember on election night, you may recall, what I couldn't get out of my head that night was Ukraine. And I was thinking, here we are. Yes, we've lost an election, but here we are living in a country where we're not having to defend ourselves against an aggressor coming across our borders. Yeah, we've got threats on our borders. We've got threats from countries in our region. That's all true. But here they were doing that, fighting literally with their own lives for their democracy, and here we were living it. And I thought, this is an amazing country, and despite my personal disappointment, you know, the caravan moves on, the country moves on, and I hope it moves on strongly. So I still feel passionate. I mean, Labor does things differently to the way I would be doing them, but the country decided that they wanted them to have a crack at that. Well, we'll see how that goes. I know how it's gone in the past.
3 years ago, the media calls it the unwinnable election. I think anyone paying attention knew you were going to win. Then 3 years later, it's very different. Do you think, when you look back on it, you can work out when it wasn't going to happen again?
No, not precisely. And at the time, you're just very focused on what you're doing. You know, it's the equivalent of the NRL. I played 2 grand finals. I lost one. I won one. In any other sort of field of life, that's a pretty good outing. But no, not specifically. But I do think in 2021 things changed quite a lot. You know, had some really tough months around the vaccine rollout, and we had the committee, the health committee, that decided that AstraZeneca had to be only used for certain age groups, and then we had to increase supply, and I put General Fruin in, and you know, there was a lot going on that year. And then of course the second half of that year was incredibly tough for Australians. I mean, we had the East Coast effectively locked down for a very long period of time. We got to the summer, which we were all hoping would be a different summer, and Omicron hit, and there were all those challenges. So 2021 was a very difficult year. You know, in the last 3 years, I think Australia has changed a bit, and some will argue that they were changes underway anyway. Some will change it, say it was a result of the pandemic. I have no doubt that if they were changes underway, then the pandemic really accelerated it. I think people sort of reevaluated a lot during that period of time, and they really wanted to put that period behind them. So look, there are many reasons, and others will dissect this and all the rest of it. All I know is for the 3 years and 9 months that I had the opportunity, I gave it everything I had, every single day, in the best of faith, in great belief for my country.
Some political leaders have literally written books about what they did during the pandemic. Some people always write 1 or maybe even 2 volumes about their time in political life. Are you going to be the type of person who wants to talk about what he did in 10 years' time via a book, a documentary, something else?
It's not a priority. I'm pleased that Simon and Jeff have written that book. I think it does capture part of that time really well. There is a lot more, so if they ever want to do a second edition, there's a lot more material. But no, I don't feel the need to do that job myself. I think it's important that there's a good place where people can go, students, you know, journalists, researchers and others, and be able to pull out, you know, what happened. And you know, I'm interested in trying to make sure there's sort of an e-resource that people can access. Just, you know, what were the speeches, what were the transcripts, what was said, what was in the budget, what was, you know, just a basic set of facts, because, you know, facts are sometimes hard to come by. And I wouldn't want people not to have the excuse of not being able to find them.
Yes.
So I think it's important to do things like that.
How have you healed after the election?
In the very warm embrace of my family, of Jen and the girls, and my close friends, and this wonderful community, my church, all of the above. That's where you go, and I'm just so thankful for all of that. I mean, you know, you can get through a period of, I said before, you can get through a period like this and go, oh, or you can just go, thank you. I look around at the end of that period in my life, and There's Jenny, there's the girls. You know, life's good. For some people, political achievement is everything. And it's incredibly important. But it is not the sum total of who I am. In the middle of the moment, okay, they're having a big crack at me. I'm just not engaging in it. I mean, I think someone has to sort of break the circuit here. I could respond to this claim and this accusation and this slur and all the rest of it, but I don't wish to do that. I'm not bitter. I'm thankful. I'm grateful. If others want to continue on with that, they will. I'll work through those processes. But I'm not going to let that define our life now and what I'm about. I've always sought to be about. I don't claim any perfection by any stretch of the imagination.
Obviously, due to the time commitment, you're obviously a very emotionally present husband and father, but not physically. And, you know, I know even in this little sliver of a job that there's plenty of times you've got to say, sorry guys, got to go, sorry guys, got to go. And there would have been a lot of that over a long period of time. Now that you look back at this beautiful woman you can spend as much time with as you want and kids that you can do as much as you can with, how do you look back at that time where you had to say, sorry guys?
Oh, that is the cost. And it's a big cost. And it's a painful cost. It's a painful cost for them and for those who do it as politicians. But as Tony Abbott used to say, we're volunteers, they're conscripts. And that's probably one of the truest things Tony has ever said. And very wise. So you deeply regret their cost. That's what hurts the most. But you know, Abby was born a few months before I went into Parliament. They lived their entire lives with me in Parliament, and most of it with me as a minister. And when I became Prime Minister, I had these 2 primary school girls. And now we've moved back into our sort of little bungalow here in the Shire, trying to fit 2 teenagers back into this house, and stuffing them in and their stuff and all the rest of it. That's been fun. But yeah, no, look, I don't at all for a second regret the choices I've made to serve my country in politics, and neither does Jenny, and neither does my family. You know, we've all paid this price happily and gladly, although it is a cost. But at the same time, you can't be foolish not to understand that and recognize. You can't pretend that it's not there. It is there. It is real, and there are moments I will never get back.
You know, go through this period of time when your kids want to be around their dad as much as possible, and then once they get a bit older, kind of they don't quite, but you want to pull them closer. You've now got the time to pull them closer, but are they going?
No, they're not. This is good.
You're in the zone.
You just got to keep doing as much as you can to just keep those connections as strong as you can. And now I've got a better opportunity to do that, and that's the opportunity that comes sometimes out of, you know, what is the disappointment, obviously losing an election, but at the same time, you know, life moves on, and my most important job is as a husband, as a dad. You
talked about the change in 2021 and be it the pandemic and everything else. Have we come to expect too much of government, that at any and every inconvenience government will be there to help you?
I can understand how during the pandemic, where there was unprecedented support to people in crisis, there was always the danger when we did that this would become an expectation. That wasn't a reason not to do it, by the way. We'd never seen any of us who were in government, frankly at a state or federal, anything like this in our lifetime. I mean, you talk about the economic impact of the pandemic. It was 30 times worse than the GFC. 30 times. I haven't made that up. If you look of the peak to trough impact on global GDP was of the GFC compared to what it was in the pandemic, 30 times worse. You know, that is a tidal wave of economic catastrophe that hit this country. We preserved the balance sheets of individuals. We preserved the balance sheets of businesses. We had to lean heavily on the balance sheet of the country. But prior to going into the pandemic, as a government, we'd spent 6 years getting it back into balance, which we did just in time. So, look, Paul, pleased with so much of what we're able to do. And I know Australia's in a stronger position now for what we did. And I just look forward to Australia continuing that on.
A couple of quick ones before we're done.
Yeah.
What do you want to say to the people who voted for you?
Thank you. Thank you. That's what I want to say. Whether it's here in my wonderful electorate of Cook or right across the country, it is thank you. You understood what we were trying to do. You wanted us to be able to keep doing that. You knew we weren't perfect, but you knew it was a choice. And I believe you made the right choice. And I suspect you do too. And so thank you. And don't give up on that. Don't give up on that. And, you know, please throw your support behind Peter and Susan. Get behind them as the party inevitably rebuilds. I came into the parliament in 2007. You know, apparently we're all ruined, it's all over, Kevin Rudd's going to lead the country. You know, the summits were being held, sounds familiar.
Butcher's paper,
you know, off we go. It was never going to change again. And within 3 years, they were almost a first-term government. Politics, I think, has become more dynamic. I think the demands that are on governments these days are very high. People have incredibly high expectations. Nothing less than 100% will do. And I think the nature of how politics has operated, particularly over the 3 years, has, you know, the combative nature of politics has made that the expectation. So anything less than 100% is a complete failure. Well, if you set those rules, well, you've got to live by them. And those things have been set. So my encouragement to them is, as they have encouraged me, particularly in these last recent weeks, we have had so many emails, so many calls, so many messages. I want to thank people for that. Jenny and I really appreciate it. And I just thank them very much for their support over a long time, and keep the faith.
What about the people who didn't vote for you? What do you want to say to them?
I want to say to them that you're my fellow Australians, and I sought to govern for all of you, whether you agreed with me or not. And I respect your decision. That's what I want to say. I respect your decision. I respect your choice, because that's what a democracy is. I don't have to agree with it to respect it. You'll have your reasons for it, and there are many different. And I hope that the things that you believe will be addressed to your satisfaction will be, because if they're not, well, you'll change your mind next time.
Last question. In a year from now, what's ScoMo doing?
Well, I anticipate I'll be here. Hopefully on a Sunday afternoon, because it's lovely when they have the band out here, and it's a great spot to be. Look, I look forward to being, you know, continuing to be, you know, a really effective local member of parliament, supporting a lot of my colleagues find their feet and really turn into really great members of the team. You know, I'll be doing a bit more of things, possibly, you know, in addition to my parliamentary responsibilities, which many members of parliament do. And I hope, because I've started playing golf again, hadn't picked up a club in about 15 years, and sort of picked up the bug a bit. So, you know, hopefully my swing will be good. And I hope we'll be looking to back-to-back premierships for the show.
Oh, stop it! All right, I'll see you here in a year's time. Thank you, mate.
Cheers.
Appreciate it.
Good on you, mate. Up, up.